Same age.
Good.
My daughter about to be 17, so he's 17.
Your daughter's 17.
Yeah, Prince is about to be
Time be
17.
moving.
Yeah.
Yo,
So,
I hate to break it to you.
what you hate to break? You think that he broke my daughter? You being who you are with a big platform, you know what I'm saying, have such ignorant takes sometimes. Shut the f*** up. I'm your
That's
friend.
how this platform got big.
I don't think I wasn't here when it got big. I came here when
Yes,
it
you was.
bigger.
Nigga, it got bigger when you came.
So then now, when I was at home for half the day and I knew the reason why, it kind of like, with the personal issues that I'm dealing with and me not able to come in, it just kind of frustrated me. Our friend, boss, he doesn't handle things well all the time. So, and as far as communication, you know, we got to communicate with Ian. And he's a very
Joe Budden is walking a very fine line here. Well, honestly, if it were anyone other than Flip, he probably would be. And at the same time, he's clearly trying to reinforce the idea that this is his show, that he runs it, that he can speak on whatever he wants. You see it in how he interacts with Ice, like when he's joking about him being a girl dad. You see it again with Ish, especially when he keeps clowning his business moves, or even teasing him for simple things like leaving the house. But right now, Flip feels like he's heading into a difficult stretch. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is starting to look like a humiliation phase for him on the show. Joe is likely going to turn up the pressure on Flip, especially now that Flip has been trying to open up more on camera. And that actually connects to something bigger. People online often criticize me for not involving my personal life or family in content to the point where it becomes part of the discussion. So now I've started sharing more stories about my kids and things happening in my household. And in a way, that's what Joe seems to want from everyone on the panel. More openness, more personality, more access. It makes the audience more invested in the co-hosts as individuals, not just voices on a mic. But here's the tension. Joe did make a fair point when he was talking about parenting and how perspectives change over time. Still, those kinds of conversations probably should be had off-air first, especially if someone is just now adjusting to being more open on the mic. The issue is, Joe doesn't really seem concerned with that boundary. His focus is content first, and that's where things start to shift again. Flip is now in the middle of what looks like a public apology run involving Ice after the way things escalated on the show. At the same time, Flip is trying to change how he shows up, less aggressive, more open, more reflective. But instead of that being fully supported, it feels like it's being tested, like it's being used against him. Because Joe holds the authority in the room, anything Flip says or does can be framed through that power dynamic. And there's also a double standard at play. When Flip shares personal experiences or makes certain jokes, people immediately react to him differently than they might react to Joe or others in similar situations. But because Joe is the host and the boss, those comparisons don't get made out loud in the same way. And that creates a situation where co-hosts feel pressured to open up, but also aware that what they say can be used against them later in the narrative of the show. And that's why moments like this matter, because it raises a bigger question about trust on camera. If you're being encouraged to be authentic, but that authenticity can also be used as material. If someone close hears a clip like this, they're going to attach it back to me. So yeah, naturally, people are going to try to distance themselves from that type of content. And then you've got Flip doing the complete opposite. He's trying to show loyalty, like he's in it for the long run. The way Joe used to view Mark Lamont Hill is kind of how he once viewed Flip. But instead of benefiting from that position in the expected way, things have played out differently. The expectation was that people would open up more, especially about personal life and family. There's even been running jokes around Joe being a part-time dad or comments tied to his parenting. So whenever he speaks on fatherhood, it's already framed through that public perception. And because of that, anything others say about their own families gets treated differently too. That's where the tension comes in. When Flip jokes about boundaries, like telling Joe not to speak on his kids or his relationship, it starts light, but over time it shifts into something more serious. Now it's not just banter anymore. It's becoming a real line being drawn about what can and can't be said on air. Meanwhile, there's also a difference in how those conversations are handled depending on who's asking. When Ish asks about personal topics, it comes off more relatable and grounded. But when it's coming from Joe, the dynamic feels different because of his position on the show. At the same time, I've noticed myself spending more time on Twitter lately, just observing conversations. I even saw someone joking that Joe is basically the Wendy Williams of podcasting for grown men. And honestly, when you look at how personal topics are handled on the show, you can kind of see why people make that comparison. He's also spoken about figures like Mona Scott Young and how she helped shape reality TV culture, which ties into the larger idea of turning real-life situations into content. From Joe's perspective, it seems like part of this comes from experience. He went through the industry grind and all the public scrutiny on his own, so now he expects the people around him to go through a similar level of pressure if they're benefiting from the platform. But that approach has consequences, because while the show thrives on openness and honesty and real conversations, there's also a risk of pushing things too far when someone is finally opening up about sensitive parts of their life. And that's where the audience comes in. A lot of listeners are in relationships, married, or dealing with family life themselves, so when those topics are handled carelessly or turned into jokes at the wrong moment, it can create a disconnect. At the end of the day, you can't ignore how quickly audiences move now. People don't always announce they're leaving, they just disengage. So if the balance between humor, honesty, and sensitivity gets thrown off too often,